And we're live. Welcome to the book launch of Alethea Lyons' The Hiding. I've been practicing The Hiding all day because we had another book with the word hide in it literally last spring, and I got it wrong all day yesterday. So basically, Steve's been like one of those people, subliminal messages ever since then.
That's okay.
All I'm saying is my 2-year-old can say hiding, so no one else has an excuse.
No one else has an excuse. No one else has an excuse. And we're joined with Rae Wilde and Tanya Pell. And if we just want to go around real quick and do a quick introduction, make sure that you plug whatever you're doing right now, whatever you're working on, whatever you've recently done. We're Heather and Steve from Bridget's Gate Press. We're kind of the most boring guests, so we're going to skip us.
Yeah, we're old folk.
Yeah, we're old folk. Rae, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rae Wilde. I've published a number of things under the pen name Rae Knowles. Most recently, Lies That Bind came out, which is an erotic horror novel that I co-wrote with April Yates. And in January, super excited about Scissor Sisters coming out. And that is an anthology of sapphic villains that I edited also with April Yates. But I'm very excited to be here to support you. This has been such a fun road. I'll say more about that later.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Taylor.
Joining from outside.
Taylor, you're right on time to introduce yourself.
Oh, great.
Yeah, right on time.
Throw you in at the deep end.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Okay, hi. I'm Taylor. I am a YA and adult horror author. My debut is coming out from Peachtree Teen in fall 2025. And another book to follow in 2026. I live in Connecticut with 2 cats who actually write my books for me.
Excellent.
Good witchy cats.
Excellent. And Tanya, why don't you go next?
Okay, so I'm Tanya Pell, and please excuse the avatar. No one wants to see me right now because I literally got out of the hospital like 30 minutes ago. So I have my horror debut coming out through shortwave in September of this year called Cicada, just in time for the cicada, the cicada
invasion.
Swarm. I mean, I'm not saying I did it on purpose, but I'm not saying that. I have a short story coming out in the Mother Knows Best anthology with Black Spot Books, edited by Lindy Ryan. With Mother Horror doing the forward. That comes out just in time for Mother's Day. US Mother's Day, not UK Mother's Day, so sorry. And go on sub with some more books next week. So busy.
Busy. Okay, Thea, you're up.
So I'm Alethea Lyons. And obviously I have a book coming out on Tuesday, just in case, you hadn't noticed, which is the first in the Seer of York series. And then in September, we've got some short stories to go with that, and book 2 coming next March. And in the meantime, I'm querying a cyberfae novel.
I saw that. Very fun. Very fun. So we usually kick it off with, and we've had to change this a little bit because sometimes through edits, the line that starts it all with me doesn't make the final cut to the book. So I've started pulling from final manuscript instead of first manuscript because somebody called me on it last year and they're like, I don't even see this line in the book. And I'm like, yeah. Turns out it didn't make it through the husband edits. But yeah. So usually when I read, my mother read to us every night. And I usually tell this story about how my sister and I were merciless children and never let my mother get a break and begged for more chapters until she was hoarse. And I think what I want to do is say, though that is true, my mother was a voracious reader and reads everything from nonfiction to fiction to classics to modern to pulp. And she read everything to us regardless of age. And I think because of that, as I read a story, most of the time, my mother becomes the narrator's voice, which sometimes is tricky when the narrator is a man. But still, it's her voice. And so usually when I'm reading manuscripts, I kind of wait for my mother to start telling the story. And that's usually when I'm like, yeah, this is one that we want to publish. And with Thea's book, it was early on. And here's the line in the final manuscript, so you can find it. The hairs on her bare arms prickled despite the lingering summer warmth. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in human evil. And so that did it for her. Yeah. And it was really the whole opening paragraph. But and I think that's where I kind of want to start. I want to talk about the book a lot because there's a lot to talk about with the book. But what I want to talk about is, first off, what are you reading now or have read recently that you would plug as something you really enjoyed? And what was it about the book, without trying to give any spoilers up? What was it about the book that made it the one that you were like, yeah, that's a good one. That's a keeper. Now, I won't pick on somebody to go first. Is anybody ready to go first?
It's amazing because whenever people ask this question, I'm like, I haven't read a book ever in my life. I have never read a book.
Right. Right.
What are books?
What are they? But I am currently reading Sundial by Catriona Ward, which I'm a few years late for. But the voice is spectacular. If you haven't read it, it's split into, I believe, 4 different narratives strands. One is the main characters, but then there's also the main character's memories, her daughter, and a book that the main character is writing. So it's a really interesting book. And from the first couple of pages, I was taken with the main character's voice. Also, if there's feedback, I'm sorry, it's very windy here.
Oh, it's all right. That just adds to the charm. If we're lucky, my Siamese will house in, so there'll be lots of background noise.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Who wants to go next? What are you reading or what have you read recently?
I'm trying to get through my beta reading before I leave for the States in less than 3 weeks now. So I'm beta reading a couple of books that are both absolutely fantastic and give me major imposter syndrome that I'm reading these and going, this feels like it's a published book already. Which are both kind of in the broad speculative, but not strictly speaking fantasy or sci-fi, but kind of a bit of a blend. And then when I'm away on holiday, I've got a couple of my fellow 2024 fantasy debut books lined up to take with me. So I've got So Let Them Burn for the plane, assuming that my toddler lets me actually read anything on the plane.
Right.
But I'm really looking forward to that.
I can jump in. I'm currently rereading Slaughterhouse-Five from Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just saw I totally agree. And the whole first chapter is sort of him talking about how difficult it was for him to write this book and the style that he's using is one that so clearly portrays the trauma of this experience for him. And it's a little hard to describe without like actually staring at the text. But I so admire when a writer has the ability to convey how they feel about something with both the words that they are putting on the page and the ones that they are seemingly intentionally refusing to put on the page. And it's a really interesting skill that he has. So I'm really enjoying that.
He's got a book that was, I think, partially from him, but sort of done by someone else, but with him, that's on his style of writing and about writing that I got for my dad for Christmas a year or two back. That was really interesting.
Oh, I bet I'd love to check that out.
Yeah.
I have actually been hopping back and forth with a couple, but most recently, The Forest Demands Its Due by Cosco Jackson, which is just, you have to stop because the beautiful sentences, like just sprinkled throughout this book amongst all this dark, forbidding forest and these just little moments of character beauty that he he writes is phenomenal. And then I did finally make myself, and I say this in the best way possible, finish the last book. Apropos to this is The Changeling by Matt Veselovsky, which is the last book that I had reserved as a reward for myself for his 6-story series, which are all written as podcasts. And this was the last one I had left to read, and I was saving it for a reward because I love them so much. But those are masterclasses in character voice, where every character sounds completely different, and again, completely apropos, since the speculative element is changelings. So, which I know Rachel knows absolutely, nothing about.
What are you reading right now?
Or I haven't really started anything new yet, but what I just got finished reading was a new release by V. Castro. It's her Belit Shipwrecked, and I really enjoyed that one. Of course, I really love sword and sorcery, and if you like that genre, I definitely recommend it.
I like V. Castro.
Yeah, she's a great writer. So.
I just started Tim McGregor's Ian Hollow. What's really horrible is I want to call it Ever Hollow. And so that's what I literally have called it to everyone I've talked to about it. So I really just apologize. Just look up Tim McGregor. But, and I'm literally just a couple of pages in, but he wrote another book called Lure that I suspect could be my rosebud on my deathbed. So I've already prepared our son. Like if I just start talking about lure and weird sea creatures, you'll know that it's just a book that I can't get out of my head. Like it's in there forever now. So, but I highly recommend his work. He captures the feeling of a place so much. And I think this is part of the reason I fell in love so quickly with The Hiding, is because of the place and the place description. And I love it when setting is like its own character. I think that's kind of my Gothic roots love, but I really like York is its own character in the book.
Yes.
And so I really love that kind of story, because I feel like Steve and I talk about this all the time. Give me great, rich characters. Give me a great plot. Give me something I don't want to put down, but give me a place that is part of the book. That if you removed the atmosphere and feeling and the weight of the place, the book would be completely different. And I feel like this book, York is its own. And didn't you do one as one of your character sketches, Thea? Is York is its own character sketch. And I thought that was brilliant, because it's very true. Like, it's, so I guess my first question is why York? Like, was it always York when you were thinking about this story, or did York come later?
I had the story first, and I was trying to find somewhere to set it, and it needed to meet certain criteria. It needed to have, obviously, a suitably atmospheric presence. So it needed to be somewhere older, but I wanted it to have that political and religious history that would explain why it was this hot seat of power and why all these things were happening in this particular place as opposed to somewhere else. And I'm a northern girl. I am from the north of 2 countries, so we did not have things from the south. Sorry to Rae in Florida. But like the 2 main religious centres from a Christian point of view in this country are York and Canterbury. York being for the north and Canterbury for the south. And York has such a history of political upheaval and rebellion as well, which appeals to me. Yeah. So, and we spent most of my holidays in Yorkshire when I was a child, so it's somewhere I've been a lot and very familiar with, and did not mind an excuse to go visit a lot again.
Yeah, and what was funny to me is the day you visited, and I'm sure it's not unusual, but the day you visited, there was fog, that like the fog rolled in while you rolled in also. And I loved that because of the cover of the book. You and Elizabeth wanted fog, on on the streets. And so I thought that was pretty fitting when you sent the pictures over. And I was like, oh, well done, York. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, it knew I was visiting, and it was like, here, we'll roll out the welcome mist.
We've made several jokes about how Rachel is just like manifests fog and mist in every single thing she writes. And it's always so very, very realistic. And you can like feel the droplets on your skin and you smell it. And it's always incredible.
You can tell I don't live somewhere hot.
Yeah, because you can feel the chill. You can feel the chill and the wet, especially. And because when we have fog, it's not really special fog. Like, it's just fog. But when we were in the UK, and the first time I experienced fog, I don't even remember where we were. I think actually we were in Wales. And like, it is a wet, heavy fog. It is not just like, oh, there's fogs in the low ground and by the lakes. It is like, someone's wrapping you in a wet, cold blanket type of fog. And I was like, okay, then fog is different here. Much different here. Yeah.
It's like it rains, but the rain just stops in the middle of the air and it just stays there.
Yeah. It's odd. It's odd. But so yeah, it's interesting because I'm a medieval history. That was what my degree was in. And so I've always loved York because of the political uprising of the House of York, and then the Archbishop of York sometimes being more powerful than the Archbishop of Canterbury, and sometimes constantly going after the Archbishop of Canterbury to be the most important person in a council meeting is, well, I think it's delightful. I'm not sure if that's the right word when you talk about things that bloody and awful, but so I loved that York was part of the thing. And I mean, and it hasn't stopped. When they found Richard's body a few years ago, the city of York was like, and clearly he'll be buried here, because he's the son of York. And everyone was like, well, what about where we found him? And they're like, nah, that's
he's
not
been there for a few hundred years. We'll take him back.
Yeah, we'll take him back. And I mean, like, it was a throwdown the way it read here in the States. Like, everyone was ready to go to war again over a dead king's body. And I was like, well, House of York again.
I live in Lancashire. My husband is local. So he's like, you're going across to York. We're not having these white roses. We can't, definitely. Like, I'm sorry, I grew up on the East Coast. I'm a Yorkshire girl rather than a Lancashire girl.
Some wars are slow to end. But okay, so the other thing I really like about this book is the Scooby Gang feel. I grew up in the 70s, and so I'm a Scooby-Doo fan to the end. Like, you give me a mystery that has a group of what only seems mismatched if you really think about it, group together, because you're like, why, especially in the 70s, would the football guy be hanging out with someone like the science nerd, or the stoner and his big Great Dane? Like, how did these people even come together? But Catherine, not a city girl. The 6-hour drive. You guys over in the United Kingdom crack me up.
Edinburgh is a long way away. I definitely recommend Edinburgh as well, but that is a long way for us.
Well, where we live, everything's at least a 12-hour ride. So
anywhere you want to go.
When I hear people talking about, oh, that's 4 hours away, I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah, like, that's just a trip to St. Louis. We do that just for fun. When we were younger, we'd come back the same day. Yeah. Now we're old and can't drive in the dark, so we have to send those kind of trips for the summer.
I'm going to Texas, which could swallow my country several times over.
Yeah, Texas is the
my aunt within Texas. You'd basically be in the ocean on one side and the North Sea on the other.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Texas is you could drive for 12 hours to Texas and still be in Texas, depending on where you start.
Done that.
Yeah, so yeah, me too. We used to go to Texas every summer. My mom's parents lived there, and that was it was 9 hours in the car, and we just did it like it was Sunday afternoon. Like, we'd be like, all right, let's go to grandma's house, and we'd pile in the car with our cooler and go.
Yeah, that's an easy drive.
Yeah, that's a straight shot down through corn country. So, okay, so let's talk about our Scooby Gang. who was the first character? Did they all come to you at once, or did they come to you in pieces? Like, who was your first? Anything over an hour requires serious consideration.
Yep, that's true. For these ones, they came as a group because it came from a dream that I had, which has not made it into either of the final books. It would have been a scene that would be Insomnia, but I don't think it's going to end up being in there, which was basically just a scene at the house of them hanging out and having then this call from the police saying, we need you to come down. This weird thing has happened. We need your expertise. And the discussion they were having, just trying to get out the door with the very kind of, right, we're going to do this, and I'm going to be the general and order everything. And then other people will be like, yes, but we need to take all of this equipment. We need to get that. And then we've got a deception demon who's like, I'm playing a video game. I don't want to leave. I don't care that someone's been murdered.
Who's your favorite character? What was your favorite one to write? Who was your favorite one to write?
Answer wisely. Because I'm ready to
There's
fight.
a right and a wrong answer here, is there?
I'm ready to throw hands.
Okay. I know various people who have different favorite characters, which is actually always really interesting to hear. I think different people have said to me that their favorite one is at least one of the different ones throughout. So everyone has a fan, which is nice.
Yeah.
I think in terms of just like purely the most fun to write, I really enjoy writing the non-humans. So Heresy is fun to write.
Yes.
Carry on.
Good
Carry
choice.
on.
Heresy is a lot of people's favorite just because he's so sarcastic and flippant. So it's just like a completely different viewpoint, which is fun and very different from what my viewpoint would be, which is always fun. And like in Insomnia, one of my point of view characters is a cat. So it's very interesting to try and write from his point of view or the antagonist's point of view, because the antagonist isn't human. And it's like, okay, if I were the thing that she is that I won't say because of spoilers, what would I actually think about the situation?
Okay, so what's everybody else's favorite character to read?
I was going to say Heresy. And also, sorry, my camera was like, I'm not playing anymore. But I'm here, I promise.
Right.
So weird. But Heresy, by far. Playful, but also manipulative, but also morally gray. And you just never know the reliability of that character. So it's fun to imagine the world in which this character exists. And also, it's just great. It's just like a fun character to have in any gang. And also, I don't know. I think I'm most like Heresy. Thea can tell me if I'm wrong.
I don't think you're that unreliable. I mean, I've known you, for 3 and a bit years now?
That's true. I'm usually not unreliable.
No, you've never let
Sometimes.
me, set myself on fire or blow anything up.
That's true.
Yet.
Not yet, anyway.
I'm also going to throw my hat in for Heresy, and I'm going to absolutely show my nerd card here that they will absolutely understand, which is Heresy is almost this perfect combination of Calcifer and Dorian Pavis.
Yes. Sorry.
And where it's just it's
I think it's a mix of Calcifer and a Ghibli soot.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it's sass, but it's also just kind of and you also get a lot of very which I think is kind of par for the course with you when you're writing any type of fey creature, but you get a little bit of Puck in this character too. I've seen it all. Nothing you people do surprises me. Just entertain me. So you have me for what is a blink of my life and your entire lifetime. Entertain me while you're here. And maybe I'll help out if I feel like it.
And one of the things that is kind of in my list of things I want to write is a collection of pre-hiding Heresy short stories from the various points in the last couple of centuries that he's been in Earth.
Oh, how fun.
Yes.
all these like well-known magicians and things. He's like, right, entertain me. I will teach you a magic trick, and you can make something fun happen, and I will laugh if other people get hurt during it.
Yeah. What about you, Rae? Favorite character?
So my favorite is also Heresy, but just so we have the opportunity to talk about another character, my second favorite was Usa. And what I love about her, and I'm going to try not to give any spoilers, but I don't think this is one because we understand she's not human from the second chapter. So that's not really a spoiler.
Right.
But I always think it's really interesting when we get a point of view character who does not experience emotions in a human way. And I always really enjoy those points of view. So I really, really liked the chapters that focus on Usa.
I really liked writing her chapters because, as you say, it's that if I was someone who didn't experience emotions in a human way and hadn't grown up being taught this is what an emotion should be, this is the reaction you should have to X, Y, or Z, and you're either experiencing it for the first time or just not experiencing it at all, what would your reaction be, even if it's something really horrific like someone dying?
Mm-hmm.
Right. What about you?
Well, I'm also going to say Heresy.
I know. I know.
I do listen as a fan favorite.
Yeah.
One of the things I love is just Heresy can be helpful, but only on its own terms.
Yeah.
You know, like, and this is not in The Hiding, it's rather in the collection of short stories coming out.
Don't make a spoiler.
I'm not going to make a spoiler. I'm going to be very vague, but there's a scene where they leave, and after they've gone, Heresy's like, well, did you notice this? And it's like, no, why didn't you tell me? Well, I was waiting to see if you would catch it.
Right. Waiting to see if you were smart
back
enough.
to the scene they have to go to explore again. It's like, I just love that.
Yeah. I love the snark.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
I mean, like that's, I think, I don't know, maybe we're all just similar, but I'd be very interested as the book rolls out, you know, what the cult followings are for the different characters. Because I think Heresy's the winner.
I think so.
Our sampling is small, so it's hard to say if that will be true, you know, as everyone else gets it. But I have to tell you, I'm also a big fan of Harper. And I think that one of the things I really like about Harper is kind of the it's difficult to constantly make eye contact.
Okay.
Is the kind of inner dialogue about being who she is and working for who she works for. I don't really want to give it away, but
pretty early. I don't think that's a spoiler.
You don't think it's a spoiler? So, but there's, you know, like there's a conflict, an internal conflict in the character. And I'm, you know, listen, I like internal conflict. I like conflicted characters, you know, and so I enjoyed that because I think it played throughout the book. So, but I mean, listen, if we were starting a fan page, it would be Heresy all the way.
Yeah, but I also think that there's something really nice to be said about Harper's relationship to Grace, her sister. And as somebody who somehow cannot write like a normal relationship between family members, I always found their relationship really heartwarming and singular-minded, that they're protecting each other. And that's something that's actually quite difficult to write because it can end up being, number one, unrealistic, and number two, cloying. And somehow, Thea, you have never done that. You've managed to make a realistic, loving relationship between these two characters who are admittedly going through some very challenging things. And yet they remain realistic, which is astonishing.
And that was the main relationship that I wanted to focus on in this book. There's deliberately not a romance in it because I wanted to have as the primary focus the relationship between Harper and Grace. and that be like Harper's primary relationship and primary support.
Mm-hmm.
But what I
think that.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
But another thing I think that you're amazing at is this particular book, does not have a romance arc, but you're so good at making these settings, these characters have a very romantic feel to them. So it genuinely comes across where you get these moments of pure emotion and just that like throb through the story without there being an actual romance arc, and yet lending itself to that very soft, loving, romantic feeling that we almost kind of expect from a romance.
I would agree. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think one of the things that really appealed to me is the sister arc. I'm very close to my sister, and so I sometimes
phone calls at 2 a.m. because there's a crisis.
You don't know, man. You don't understand. But like, I mean, my sister and I talk to each other almost every day. Like when I had COVID, I didn't answer the phone much, mostly because I wasn't awake or coherent much. But when I started to feel better, I was like, when was the last time I talked to my sister? And I called her and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, thank goodness that you're finally a person. But it was, I mean, I don't know. I think it can be difficult to accurately portray a sister bond that's really close, because I think not everybody has, I'm going to call it a privilege of having a good relationship with their siblings, and especially a sister. And I'm not saying my sister and I didn't fight or carry on when we were kids or even as adults, but I mean, the one thing I would tell you is if I disappeared, my sister would hunt the earth for me, and she'd never stop. I mean, never. And it would never occur to her to stop. So, and vice versa. So I love the sister relationship in the book. And
I have a good relationship with my sister, and my mother has 3 sisters, and so I've kind of grown up with her and my aunts, and that side of my family is very close as well, the relationship that they have. So there's a lot of times in my family where that's been modeled really well. But I also liked showing it as a non-blood relationship, because there's a lot of adoption in my family, and I don't think that makes a difference in terms of the relationship that people have. And so I liked being able to explore it from that they weren't born together, they're not blood relations, but they are sisters.
Can I ask? I think I just saw a fabulous review of The Hiding that made a lot of comparisons to Buffy.
Yes, it's review.
I loved that. I didn't think of it at the time reading it, but it makes so much sense in hindsight. And now that we're talking sort of about the thread line of familial love, I think that was also really prominent in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm just curious to hear what you think of that comparison as the author.
I mean, when I pitched it on Twitter, when you don't have to have it as a book in the last 3 years and it can be anything, I pitched it as Buffy and Charmed, which shows exactly how old I am.
Hey, me too.
I mean, Ed taking the time to go through and try and exactly match characters amused me greatly. But definitely that kind of vibe of you've been thrown into this circumstance together as really close friends, and that becomes a family.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that early on reading the book, that it had a Buffy feel. I'm going to say something wildly unpopular and admit that I have never watched Buffy.
She's watched a couple episodes from the first season.
Yeah.
I'm the Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. Here.
Yeah.
And several seasons I've watched multiple times.
Yeah. So.
And that was definitely a draw with Hiding.
Yeah. I love a family trope too.
Thea, did you? Oh, sorry. Thea, did you?
Go ahead.
Did you think of Buffy when you were writing it?
Not immediately, because I wasn't even thinking in terms of, what can I compare things to? Because I wasn't in publishing, as it were. At that point, I wasn't trying to query anything because I wrote the first draft. I wrote the Somnia first, and I wrote that for Nano one year and realized it was a book too. But when I was writing that was before I started querying anything, before I knew you do this with the comparisons and all of that kind of stuff. So I wasn't directly comparing it, but just because it was something that was a big influence in my teenage years, it was probably in there in the back of my head.
Isn't that amazing how when we write books, we are drawing from these wells that we don't even know exist, and then when we finally sit back from the writing page, we can see our influences so clearly. I always find that fascinating that, we're crafting these worlds and they feel so insular, but once you really step away from them, you realize they're part of a web of relations and influences and personal life. It's amazing how that found its way into your work so emphatically. So much so that a reviewer who doesn't know you, like I know you, but a reviewer who doesn't know you can point to it and say, this feels like Buffy. And indeed, like, it's an influence.
Absolutely. And it's something we watched a lot of. It was probably the closest thing I ever watched to horror when I was younger, being a complete and utter wuss. So it's definitely in there. And I think there's a lot of that in Grace's character, particularly in the totally. I'm going to go out and fight it. But
when did Buffy the Vampire Slayer come out?
90s.
Late 90s.
Late 90s, I think. What was
maybe
it?
very late 90s or 2000, like 99 or something. Just thinking of how old
I think it's early 2000s, or at least that's when I was watching it.
One of the things I'm sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out one of the things I loved about Buffy, and one of the things I really appreciated about The Hiding as well, is, and I say this with the caveat that I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, so I'm not super like submersed in the genre, but I love that both the humans and like the various non-human characters, there was a real spectrum of personalities and levels of good, evil, and otherwise, and somewhere in the middle. And I really enjoyed that nuance in The Hiding, Thea. I think you did a really good job with that. I find it so much more interesting than fantasy realms where one class of creature is very clearly this one thing and they get like painted with a broad brush. I think it's so much more interesting that your characters had to kind of figure out one by one, what's this one's deal, and kind of have to sort through it. It makes for a much more interesting read.
And I like the fact that they have different opinions on things, because sometimes I just let them talk and then I edit it down later. And like AJ's opinion, who we don't see until much later in the book, so we'll see more of his opinion going on, is often much more grey than Harper's opinions on things. And Grace is very black and white. It's either this is good, this is evil, off we go. And then we have these varying scales of grey going between her and Heresy. Yeah. And I like the fact they disagree, and I think that's one of the things that makes good friendships and good team dynamics, is that you can disagree and have those different points of view.
And I think again that lends itself to the Buffy and the Scooby comps, is you have these logical characters balanced against these emotional characters balanced against these I'm having fun.
Yeah, I'm a huge Scooby Gang fan still. Like, all the kids grew up watching Scooby-Doo.
Which surprises me why you didn't like Buffy at all.
Listen, if it really came out in the late 90s, it's not that I don't like Buffy, but remember, we had all the babies then. Yeah, Philip and Emily had already been born and were little and running around, and I was at soccer, I swear, every day. So I didn't watch a lot. Listen, when you suddenly have a bunch of children you're in charge of,
you don't watch much TV, because like any free time you have, you either stare at the ceiling and pray for death, or you sleep. And like that's it. And it's because it's really just about vomit and poop and laundry, really, for several years. And it's so I think it's easy to say that I missed anything between 97 and 2005. I have no idea what happened. Like, I didn't
I couldn't tell you what books came out. I couldn't tell you what was on TV or what was at the movie theater. Like, I've got no idea what was going on.
I don't know what's on TV at the moment, because when Sprite sleeps, I write.
Yeah, because Sprite's 2, right? So it's like there's nothing but child when they're under the age of 5. You know, it's all about survival, man.
I feel like
I
that's
would love
to
to write books about dreams and sleeping on the say-so of my child who is sleeping and letting me write the books about sleeping.
Right.
Quick
I would
question
love
on
to ask
Buffy.
you about that, actually, Thea. It's like, I think we're all parents in the chat. And I find it difficult with 2 children to balance my writing and my reading and my parenting. And I'm wondering...
we balance?
What is it even? There is none. But I'd love to hear, because obviously this book has gone through revisions before being published, and you've had Sprite. So how do you find that balance? And how do you find time to edit and write? And do you find that your ideas lately are different or the same since you've had him?
I think in terms of the time, in some ways it's balanced out quite well, because I used to work. So I was working 9 hours a day plus commuting back and forth. And I would try and write on my lunch break, but that's assuming that I got a lunch break, which was quite unusual. And as soon as you're sitting in the break room with your laptop trying to write something, everyone's coming over like, oh, what are you doing? No, can you just go away? Busy? This is me time. But he naps for 2 hours, or hour and a half to 2 hours. So I actually get a nice window at that point. It's my husband who suffers from it, though, because obviously Sprite goes to bed about 7 in the evening. And then I'm like, okay, bye. I'm going to go do some more writing now. But he knows in November he doesn't see me because it's NaNoWriMo and he is a writing widower. And I'm up here on my computer doing my little solo activity, or sometimes sitting next to him on the couch working away on it. So that's kind of balanced quite well, that Sprite has his nap time, and that's my little window for editing and writing, and sometimes having to do the social media stuff. I'm like, no, I just want to write. I don't want to do social media. I think in terms of how I write, though, I've had to change it because I don't have that time before where I could sit down and I could do 6-8 hours and just have that be everything. And that's all my brain was doing for a whole day on Saturday. Because now it is definitely that 1.5 to 2 hour chunk, and you can't get lost in it because I have to constantly be listening for when he wakes up or if something happens and he needs me. So where before I would write and nothing else would be there, like my husband will be talking to me and I won't even notice he was in the room. Now there's always been my brain that has to be listening in case there's a little mommy from the other room. And that does make it kind of harder to get into the flow sometimes, I think.
Totally.
How about the rest of you? How do you balance parenthood and writing?
Extremely badly.
You write so much. Like, that's why you were the
I was going to say, okay, drafting machine.
Yeah, except that, like, I'm very lucky in that I have a huge support network, and also my children are school-aged. And so they're out of the house from 8 until 3:30, and that's the time that I use to write. On weekends, that's totally different. It's family time. There is no such thing as writing on the weekends. And sometimes to my detriment. But I find the issue that you were mentioning, Thea, I find it hard to pull myself out. So even though they're gone for a tremendous chunk of the day, when they come home, I have trouble switching over. But I found that having children really changes the topics I write about. And it used to be that, like, I could watch or read any slasher film and, like, kids could be in any number of precarious situations and I could write about those things. And now I can't even, like, fathom the idea of reading a book where a child gets hurt in a meaningful way on page. And so I can't write it.
Mhm.
And so now I'm writing a lot more about motherhood, and having time taken away, and my relationship to what I write is different. So I'd be interested to hear what other people think about this, because I think it's obviously a really meaningful change, and it affects everything.
Anybody else want to talk about it?
I'm in a similar position. My kids this year are, well, actually last year. What is time? My children are both school age. So I have from around 7:30 a.m. till when the youngest gets out at 2 to focus, but that time is divided not just on writing, but on the house, the dogs, whatever else needs to get done that day. There's always activities, there's always something. But I think for me, and this goes well with my very OCD brain, is to have, and everyone here will tell you, if I do not have it written down in the ether, it does not exist. So I will ask the same thing 10 times because I didn't write it down. So the more organized I can be, the more consistent the schedule can be, is helpful for me on all across the board, for the writing, for the parenting, for the lifing. But and I can agree with Taylor here too, is, there used to be some things I could handle reading anything. Now I have a little bit more trouble reading certain things, kind of have to take a little bit, prep myself for some days. Some days I'm just not in that mind space. I just cannot do this today. I might be able to do this tomorrow. Comes up a lot with beta reading. I think everybody here has had that, like, we're all grateful for trigger warnings. So
Yeah.
So I have,
yeah, I know.
like almost the other way with one book though, because this is one of those ones that probably no one will ever read, and it was just very therapeutic to write, because it is essentially in this high science fantasy dystopic setting, but just me working through various things about being queer and various things about having IVF and going through the IVF and adoption processes and sort of the genetic manipulation in it and the way that they handle children with magic in it. And it goes very dark in some places. And like, I think there were things that my brain just wanted to work through. And it's like, okay, use the fiction to work through these things in this very different setting, because it's very high fantasy, but in my kind of science fantasy blend way. But it's working through those real life traumas, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us do, is we frame the trauma in a way that we can look at it again and we can work through it. Especially when it comes to child trauma, child loss, things of that nature.
Isn't it great that fantasy allows us to write worlds where we can actually work through those things in like a positive manner? And it's just, it comes through in your writing, Thea, that you are writing from like not a place of not knowing. You are coming from like a very, I said it earlier, like a deep well. And it comes through because it shows how faceted the book is. It's not just, oh, we're writing about, hauntings and scary supernatural creatures and what have you. You're actually writing from a nuanced position. And those are obviously the best books,
I mean, the thing not working through, I suppose, in the hiding, but like the commentary side on that for the hiding is about some of the political situation in the UK. And I think very relevant in the US as well, and various other places. But obviously writing it while the UK is going through the Brexit process and saying we want to cut ourselves off from Europe. We don't want people who we think are different to be coming into our country, no matter the fact that we now have obviously severe skill shortages and all sorts of other problems, aside from just the moral objections to it. But to kind of take that and go, okay, I'm going to make it extreme and cut England off from everything else. But with that, they're looking at magic as being the thing that's different and should not be allowed because these people aren't like us. But drawing on the country's trauma of having to go through this separation process.
I mean, I have a lot I'd like to say, but I'm not British, but I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine being part of a European Union and then suddenly not, and everything that means for, we have our own labor problems in this country because nobody likes to talk about the fact that the only people in our country who really know how to grow food are the migratory workers. And it shows. I don't know that I've had a good strawberry since 2019. And so it's, I mean, it's a different situation for sure, but there are a lot of similarities when you start kind of what I call the isolationism politics, you know, that affects more than just the political grind. It has a huge economic price tag that trickles down to everybody eventually. So,
and a cultural and an arts price tag as well, that we lose that diversity. That when I was initially writing Somnia, I was working in a very multicultural office with a team that had people from different countries and different faith backgrounds in it. And in the middle of that, we had a bombing, literally 2 blocks from our office. And then dealing with the aftermath of that and the fact that, like, there was one girl on my team, I had to walk her to her bus for 2 weeks after work because she was so scared of going on her own, not because of the bombing, but because of people's reaction to everyone who looked like her in the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of, like, Sakib is kind of based on a couple of people who were in my team at that time. And the fact that even though we were of different religions and different cultural backgrounds, we got on very well. I was good friends with the people on my team, and we can work together. And it doesn't have to be that we go into this automatic mindset of fear and hatred just because someone isn't like us.
Right. And that was
so lends itself to a lot of the things that you write in the book. I mean, which is of course called The Hiding, and everyone in this book is hiding something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a bigger part of themselves that they have been shown time and again is not acceptable.
Right. Well, I have good news for you guys about balancing parenting and anything else is eventually they do grow up.
I only just got mine.
The youngest child that grew up in our house is now 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And, you know, has a
21.
job. No.
Yes. Yep. 21 now.
What is time?
Oh, okay. No,
he's 20.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
was thinking.
As we reminisce.
I was thinking of Colin.
No, Connor Jr. Colin.
Yeah, too many kids.
Guys. Too many kids. We had too many kids through the door here, but now there's none. So, you know, you do get a lot. The worries are different, you know, because you don't see them every day. You don't talk to them every day. You're fairly certain some of them aren't even correctly paying utilities or rent and will end up living in their car. I mean, there's a different set of worries, but it's much different because you have hours back in your day if you can learn to put the worry in a box.
But there is the phase you go through once they've grown up and moved out, is that for a while, every time you get a phone call, it's like, you know, there's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
And they're calling their parents because they've messed up.
Something horrible has happened.
They have a question.
Right.
It's like, and it's like, you answer the phone, it's like, Dad, Oh,
Yeah.
what is it now?
Yeah, just the tone of voice. It's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different ball game. But
they're your kids. You got to help them.
yeah, well, maybe. But yeah, I do. I like them all. It's hard to live without sleep, and it's hard. Here's the thing about, and I don't mean to leave you out completely, but the thing about motherhood is there's a surrender in motherhood that you're vaguely aware of, but completely unprepared for. And I don't even think that it's something you intentionally do, but it's like when you were talking about how you can't really surrender all the way into writing because you're listening for a cry, a voice, a murmur, and so that's what I mean about surrender. Because it does, everything changes. Like the focus of your free time changes, the amount of focus you can put on any task changes, and the priority of everything changes because suddenly there's somebody who depends on you just to be alive. And you're like, okay. So you do go through a period where there is this one time, Steve's kind of a prankster. And
I am.
And there was this one time where I had fallen asleep into like a deep sleep, and Steve, the charming man that he is, wakes me up and goes, "Heather, where's the baby?" And like I came flying out of the bed because I was like, "Oh my God, where is the baby?" And the baby was sleeping.
I would kill him.
next to me, right? So we were fine, but he thought it'd just be funny to see like how asleep I was. And as it turns out, you don't ever really get good sleep the first several years of motherhood. There's no such thing as big sleep. But
well, then you get to the phase where instead of, you're listening for the sounds, a cry or anything like it. But then there comes the phase where the quiet calls out because okay, I haven't heard him in like 20 minutes. What is he up to? What's he doing? I better go check.
The quiet time.
Yeah, because usually they're being quiet because they don't want.
Because they're starting fires in the front yard with toilet paper. Like something. That's the quiet time becomes the worst. Yeah.
But if you are writing, like with the hiding things, sometimes we're writing things that are quite dark or creepy or scary anyway, whether there's a child involved in it or not. And suddenly you do hear someone cry, and it's like, what's going on? Because you've just been writing a scene where there's. People dying and or someone's being followed or something. There's at least someone screams.
I'm 50 and I'm my mother's oldest child. And still to this day, she cannot read any story where a child dies. Even a teenage child. There can't be a mother and child scenario where the mother lives and the child dies in the story. It doesn't matter what genre, because my mom reads all genres. To the point where I have actually queried authors and publishers to be like, listen, I'm sorry, I need this spoiler. I just need to know, does the kid die at any point in this book? Because I can't get this book for my mother if it happens, because she will lose it. But, when we were young in the 70s, we grew up in a part of Kansas City that was, very hoity-toity and safe. And non-diverse in all definitions of the language. And a teenage girl was kidnapped a block from where we lived. And that changed our whole lives. It changed my mother's life, and it changed, my sister and I were not allowed outside unless we were together. And close enough to each other to touch each other. There was we could only play tag outside if there were 8 other kids involved, and everybody knew all the other kids, and there was a parent who was hanging out outside, and it destroyed the whole town. Yeah, really, when it happened. Because she was walking home from the pool that was just around the corner from our house with her brother, and they decided to race, and her brother was much faster than her and got blocks and blocks ahead of her, and then some guy picked her up off the street. And it took years to solve. They just solved it in the last 15 years. And so it was the thing that that stopped all mystery and thriller that involved kidnapping and child death for my mother. because it was so real in the community we were in, that the threat was too big. And, you know, I went through a period where I couldn't read anything where there was a fire with children, because my biggest fear was living in that stupid ass split level that I wouldn't be able to get all the kids out of the top floor if the furnace caught on fire, because the furnace was right under the upper staircase. And I was always afraid that the flames would shoot straight up and cut the kids off,
Right.
the ones that slept upstairs. So
now we've given you nightmares for tonight.
Yeah. And listen, it completely changed how I read Jane Eyre. You know, when the kids were little and we moved into that split level, I was rereading Jane Eyre and I was like, oh, wait. Like a whole section of our house could be cut off by fire. And we could lose anywhere from 2 to 4 children in one fell swoop. And I didn't read Jane Eyre for years after that. And I used to read Jane Eyre pretty regularly. But it's interesting how parenting changes how you read or what you watch. I can only imagine how it changes what and how you write. Yeah. And when you're able to write, really. Because
I'm gonna circle this back around. I know that you wrote this, The Hiding. Obviously, I've known you for a while now, before Sprite.
Yeah.
And yet that thread of almost being a maternal type figure, both in Harper and Usa's own way, runs through the entire book. This is about saving other people. This is about not just embracing differences, embracing the things that we find in ourselves, but it's what's your book about? What's it really about? But there's this thread of saving throughout the whole thing. And almost, I mean, I'll even say very much like a mother's revenge story going on. And you didn't have itty bitty at the time.
No, and I think this is going to sound really conceited, and I don't mean it in this way, but that's a little bit of me that's gone into Harper and Grace. Not in that I think I can go out and save the world, because I do not have that talent. But like, it's such a big part of my personality to be the big sister, because my little sister is 5 years younger than me. And even now, we're both grown-ups, there are certain things that she relies on me to do and to be the big sister. And I have unofficially adopted various younger siblings over the years. And I think if I had an older sister, or if I hadn't had a younger sister, my personality would be so much different, because my brain just defaults to that. Okay, I'm the big sister. I need to work out how to fix this. And that's kind of how I do my job, even.
I think that's true. I'm the oldest in my sibling group. I have a sister and I have a brother. And Steve's the oldest in his sibling group.
Yeah, I'm 8 years apart from mine.
Yeah, and I think there is something, I think, when you're the oldest in a sibling group, I think it does color your personality, because you're the problem solver of the group. Maybe not all the time. I did know somebody whose oldest sibling was not the problem solver of their group. And I was horrified by them every time. But I think there is something about there's something about leadership and problem solving that you may get on the fly as you're growing up that you don't get if you're not the oldest, or not the most responsible in the sibling group. And that it's interesting, because I really didn't think about it, but I wonder if that's really part of the appeal to the story to me, is that relationship, and that here's how we're going to organize. Here's how we're going to get ourselves together. Here's what, it's a relatable character trope, I guess.
I wanted to give it, not kind of in the terms of I thought out, I'm going to give them this personality trait, but I wanted to give it to Harper and Grace, because technically they don't know which one of them's older, because they don't know exactly how old Harper is. And Grace is used to being the very obvious, I'm in charge, I am a DeSantos, you will do what I say, this is our plan of attack, go and execute it. And kind of being that older sister, mother role of I'm going to protect everybody and make sure everyone comes out the other side. But then Harper has it in a much more subtle way, I hope, in her different style of leadership and taking care of people than Grace's, which is much more in your face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I definitely think Harper's is more laid back isn't the right term, but it's more in the background. Harper's a leader in a different way, and Grace is the bossy older sister, character type that I really identify with as the bossy older sister in my group.
Interesting to ask my sister.
And not just in your sibling relationship.
Yeah, I'm the bossy. Sorry, Tarzan, I didn't mean to wake you up. But
yeah, our cat just startled awake.
Yeah,
I can't really see him here, but
he's off camera. He's off camera for now. Okay, so is there anything else we've gone over and I didn't realize it? Any last thoughts anybody wants to share about the book?
Yeah, I would love to just say before we wrap up, Thea, it's been such a joy. I had the privilege of being a very early reader for this book, as did Tanya and Taylor. And I want to say to anyone watching, if you're not already involved in like a group of writers that can be your trusted critique partners and people you go to when things are tough, the group on screen right now, along with a couple folks in the chat, Jessica and Amanda, so glad you're here, have been that for each other. And what a joy it's been to have started this group, or for me having joined this group before any of us were published and working through the early drafts of our work. And then to come to a point like this where the books are about to launch, and Tanya's incredible novella Cicada is coming out from Shortwave, and Taylor's incredible book is coming out from Peachtree Teen called Hollow. Add it to Goodreads if you haven't yet for both.
Thanks.
And just plug it everything.
Goodreads.
Yeah, but it's just been such an amazing experience, and I'm so proud of you and happy for you. And I'm just truly grateful to have been able to be part of this group and kind of see it from the beginning stages to now we're here, and just a really heartfelt congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it would definitely not be the book it is without Coven input. And Taylor read it. She's the second person in the world who ever read it. She read it just after my husband read it way back. However long ago that was.
Wow, that was like 3 years ago.
I know. And if you're ever reading it and you think, okay, that's gone really dark, it's probably Taylor's fault. Because
that's probably true. Sorry.
She was my entry into horror, and she's like, you can make this darker.
It's totally true. My deepest apologies, and also congratulations. But sincerely, I want to just echo that being in a writing group and cheerleading for your friends as they move through the publishing process, which is very arduous. There are a lot of rejections and dead ends and a lot of book drafts where you don't think you're going to make it. It's so rewarding. Find a group if you can. Because there will come a day when one of you or all of you are having a book launch like this. And you get to be each other's panelists, and it's amazing. It's a wonderful feeling. I also want to say, Brigid's Gate, you bagged a real winner. This is an amazing book. And when this is out in the world, we're all going to be better for it. So...
They've done pre-order Rae's books as well, which are incredible. So,
yeah,
we
of course agree.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So Thea, as we're moving towards release day, is there anything you'd like to say to your readers?
I guess just that, read it. Everyone's going to take a different thing away from it. Whether you're reading it as being just a good story, whether you're reading it as something deeper. I really hope that people enjoy it and willing to stick with me for book 2, because I'm really excited writing it at the moment.
Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything as we wrap up?
I'm just going to say I see Jess in the comments, and she needs to be editing.
Yeah. Finish editing, Jess.
Yes. We see you.
We need a group of people who can just bluntly nag you sometimes, especially when you've got kids and it's like, okay, I've got 10 minutes. Get on with your editing.
Insert Catholic guilt here.
Well, we want to say congratulations. The book comes out on the 5th, and we're excited, of course. We
Mhm.
feel humbly that all of the books that we put out are great. And every time we get ready for a launch, I'm like, this is my most favorite one that we've done. And Steve's like, you say that every time. And I'm like, well, today it's true for this one. This is this one's time. So I'm excited for it to hit the world, and I'm excited for people to read it and experience the new Scooby Gang. Okay, last time we make eye contact.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to come to York and do a walking tour of places I've killed people in the book, then
very fun. That would be a fun field
book.
trip. That would be a fun field trip. Thea, when all the books are out, you could do walking tours of the series.
Yeah.
That would be excellent. I would come to that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, that's it. We're gonna wrap up and end the live. But thank you for joining us, and Thea, congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming so much and for all of your help. I love you all.
Congrats. Love.
Bye.
You can't see me, but I'm blowing kisses. Bye.